My son banned me from his wedding. Only his father, the man who abandoned us, was invited. The invitation was written in gold, but my name wasn't there. When I called, my son's voice was ice. "If you show up, Mom, you'll be removed. Don't disgrace yourself." 20 years of sacrifice erased in one sentence. The father who walked out got the front row seat. The mother who stayed got nothing. But I didn't argue. I didn't beg. Because I had something they never expected. In my hands was a letter, proof of every lie, every theft, every betrayal. And on the day of his wedding, I stood up before everyone and read it out loud. But to understand how I ended up standing in that wedding hall with a letter in my hands, we need to go back. He was just 9 when Gerald left, old enough to remember the sound of the front door slamming, but not old enough to understand why it stayed closed. Gerald left nothing behind, only an envelope of final papers on the counter and a voicemail. "This isn't working. I'm starting over." He married Clarissa 2 towns over, posted pictures with her kids, calling them his real family. I stopped checking his page after that, but I raised Ethan. Every homework night, every sick day, every scraped knee, every spelling bee, every single parent-teacher conference, while wearing Goodwill shoes and hoping the car wouldn't stall in the parking lot. I remember one year, we split a rotisserie chicken 3 ways over 4 days. I called it Mom's Special Budget Dinner. Ethan just called it love. He used to say, "It's okay, Mom. We're the best team." When the other kids brought iPads to school, Ethan brought a library card. When they wore Jordans, he wore clearance Velcro sneakers from Payless. He never asked why we didn't have more. He just hugged me tighter. I worked in the school cafeteria mornings, cleaned houses at night. Sometimes I'd come home and find Ethan asleep at the table, waiting to show me his drawing. I'd carry him to bed, kiss his forehead, and promise myself it would all be worth it someday. That someday was supposed to be college, graduation, his wedding. But somewhere along the line, Gerald came back, and I started disappearing. I didn't see it clearly then. I thought he just needed time with his father. I thought love could survive distance, that truth would outlast lies. I thought Ethan remembered who held him through every storm. I was wrong. I first saw Gerald again at Ethan's college graduation. I was in the 5th row, holding a bouquet I couldn't afford, wearing the only dress I owned that didn't have bleach stains on the sleeves. Ethan looked so proud in his cap and gown, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. He found Gerald before he found me. Gerald was sitting up front, crisp blazer, designer sunglasses perched on his head like a crown, and next to him, Clarissa, dressed in white like it was her son graduating. When the ceremony ended, I rushed over, my heart full, my hands shaking. But Ethan was already walking toward Gerald, not even a glance in my direction. I stood there like a guest at my own son's life. "Proud of you, son," Gerald said, all smiles and smooth lies. Ethan hugged him like nothing had happened, like 20 years of silence and back child support never existed. Then Gerald looked at me, straight through me, didn't say a word. Clarissa gave me a pity smile, the kind women use on shelter dogs they don't plan to adopt. I swallowed it all. The tears, the questions, the rage. I told myself it was just one day, but it wasn't. By fall, they were golfing on weekends. Then it was dinners, then holidays. And then I started hearing things. Your mom always needed to be in control. Dad said she made his life miserable. She used to guilt trip him just for going to work. Each time Ethan repeated something, it came out like fact, not a quote, a memory, and not his own. I tried to fight it. I tried to remind him who stayed when there was no heat, no car, no husband. But Gerald was rewriting history, one coffee meetup at a time. And Ethan? He was eager for a simpler version, one where the villain wasn't the father who left. It was the mother who stayed, the mother who made it hard. I started seeing Gerald's words in my son's eyes. And the boy who used to beg for one more bedtime story started calling me dramatic. Then came Hannah. She entered like a page from a catalog. Shiny hair, soft voice, no smudges. At first, I thought she was shy. Then I realized She was managing me, like a publicist handles a scandal. She called me Mrs. Wynne, even after I asked her to use my first name. She'd say things like, "Ethan told me you love crafting." Even though I've never touched a glue gun in my life, every compliment felt rehearsed, like she'd studied me, circled the parts she didn't like, and decided to keep things neutral. She was polite, always, but never warm. During one dinner, a tense, under-seasoned affair in their condo, Ethan asked me to maybe tone down the stories about the past. "Hannah says it stresses you out," he added, without looking up from his plate. "Stresses me out?" I wanted to say, what about the years I stretched every dollar until it screamed? What about watching other people raise your father's kids while I clipped coupons to feed you? But I didn't say it. I smiled. I passed the potatoes. I went home and sat in the dark. Later that week, Hannah called. Not Ethan. "Hannah, hi. I just wanted to touch base before we finalize the wedding list." She said it like we were colleagues, not family. "We're trying to keep things really simple and drama-free. So I just wanted to gently suggest, maybe it's better if you sit this one out." Her voice was like a silk ribbon tied around a knife. I stared at the phone long after she hung up. Not uninvited, just excluded for convenience. The next day, I saw Clarissa had posted engagement photos. Gerald was tagged. I wasn't mentioned. My neighbor Ruthie came by that evening and found me folding towels, like I was preparing for an inspection. "Did something happen?" she asked. I couldn't speak. I just handed her my phone with the call log still open to Hannah Whitaker. She read it. Then she sat down at my kitchen table and said nothing for a long time. Finally, "That girl doesn't want a mother-in-law. She wants a silent benefactor." And Ethan? He just let it happen. No apology, no explanation. Like I was just one more thing he was choosing to outgrow. It started with a smell. Old paper and cedar. Dust and time. The attic had that layered scent of grief and storage, like every forgotten thing was holding its breath. I was looking for nothing in particular, just touching things that still remembered me. There was Ethan's kindergarten drawing of a fire truck with square wheels. Gerald's old tax folders, untouched since 2004. A box of birthday cards Margaret had sent me through the years, all signed in that perfect cursive of hers, like she was still trying to be her generation's idea of proper, even when she was cursing politicians in real life. Then I found the shoebox, beneath an old Afghan, wrapped in a grocery bag from a chain that didn't exist anymore. My name was written across the top, just 5 letters, but it made my breath catch. Inside, a sealed envelope, yellowed around the edges. Her handwriting again, smaller this time, shaky. She must have written it near the end. I sat on the attic floor like a child being told a secret, and I read, "Wynne, if you're reading this, it means something has come undone." I tried to stay out of it, tried to believe Gerald's shame would bury itself, but he never had the spine for honesty. So I kept a record, I made copies, and I held them just in case he ever hurt you worse than he already had. I hope you never need them, but if you do, they're all here. Margaret. The envelope held more than just a letter. It held truth, documents, dates. A manila sleeve labeled simply DNA 2005. And suddenly, I was no longer grieving. I was calculating. The ache in my chest didn't disappear, but it sharpened into something cleaner than pain. He hadn't just left us. He'd left because of a secret. And he'd let Ethan believe that I was the one who ruined everything. I turned the envelope over in my hands. Once, twice, then reached for the manila file underneath it. My pulse was steady now. My hands were calm. Grief had made me forget who I was. But betrayal? Betrayal has a way of waking a woman up. We weren't perfect, but we were trying. That's what I told myself for years. Ethan had just turned 9 when Gerald started getting distant again, sleeping in the guest room, missing school events, barely speaking to either of us. I'd ask, "What's wrong?" He'd say nothing, but there was always something. What I didn't know then, what Margaret's letter laid out in brittle, perfect cursive, was that Gerald had taken a DNA test behind my back. He used Ethan's old toothbrush. The results confirmed what he suspected, she wrote. He wasn't the biological father. He told me first. He said he needed time to think. I begged him not to punish you both for a choice made long before you ever married. He said he wouldn't, that he forgave you, that love was bigger than blood. And for a while, he stayed. He kissed Ethan goodnight, grilled burgers on Sundays, complained about the neighbor's barking dog. But now I know what he was really doing, building resentment like a war chest. Because 6 months later, he left. No explanation, no shouting match. Just an envelope of divorce papers and that cold voicemail. This isn't working. I'm starting over. He didn't just walk out. He walked out armed, with a secret I didn't even know he'd taken. I never told Ethan the truth. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want him to think love came with conditions. Because it didn't. Not from me. Gerald's love, though, it had a fuse. And I think he always planned to light it. I kept the past buried. I told myself Ethan didn't need to know, that the man who raised him was his father in every way that mattered. But Gerald didn't let it go. According to Margaret's letter, when Ethan was in high school, Gerald started calling him more often, asking pointed questions, twisting facts, saying things like, "You ever notice how nothing ever added up when you were a kid? You know your mother always had her secrets." I'd wondered why Ethan started pulling away during senior year. Now I knew. Gerald didn't just abandon his son. He rewrote the ending and cast me as the villain. And Ethan? He swallowed every word. At the bottom of the box Aunt Margaret left, under the DNA report and her shaking words, was a second envelope. Labeled, "Financial documents. Keep safe." I opened it slowly. Inside were bank statements, property deeds, and credit applications, all with my name printed clearly across the top. But something felt off. The signature on each form looked almost like mine. But I didn't sign these. Not the mortgage co-application, not the $40,000 business loan, not the $75,000 line of credit, and definitely not the deed that showed Gerald's business office was listed under Wynn Holdings, a company I'd never heard of, registered under my maiden name, my social, my credit. That's when it hit me. He didn't just leave me, he left me liable. And while I was working double shifts to afford Ethan's braces and secondhand sneakers, Gerald had been using my identity to prop up his failing business. The wedding venue? The catering? The dress Hannah bragged about on Instagram? All of it had come from accounts opened in my name. I couldn't breathe. Not from rage, from clarity. While I was clipping coupons and checking store-brand cereal for mold, he was using me as his personal piggy bank and leaving just enough of a trail to make sure it would all fall on me if it ever collapsed. This wasn't carelessness. This was a plan. He forged my name, used my credit, risked my future, and Ethan had no idea. Or maybe he did. Maybe this was just another thing Gerald explained away with one of his smooth, confident lies. I sat at the kitchen table until sunrise, surrounded by evidence of a life I didn't know I'd been living. One where I'd unknowingly funded my ex-husband's second act and my own erasure. But I wasn't powerless anymore. I took out my phone and Googled forensic accountant, identity theft, fraud recovery. Because grief is heavy, but paperwork is lethal. I made the call at 7:02 a.m. The voice on the other end was calm, clipped, professional. Thomas Reed, forensic accounting. What's the situation? I gave him the short version, forged documents, identity theft, missing funds. Then I added, I don't just want to clean this up. I want to prove it. He said, bring everything, and don't leave out the emotional parts. They always leave a trail. I met Thomas in a quiet office above a bakery. He looked like someone who never spoke unless the sentence mattered. Pale shirt, no wedding ring, tired eyes that missed nothing. I handed him the red folder. He didn't flinch when he saw the DNA report or the forged loan applications. He just nodded. I've seen worse. That this is personal. He didn't just commit fraud. He designed it to be invisible to you, That's calculated. Within 2 weeks, Thomas had confirmed everything. Every transaction traced back to Gerald's company, listed under an LLC that used my maiden name and a P.O. box from our first apartment. He even found a vendor receipt from the wedding venue, marked Client W. Wynn. "You funded your son's wedding without knowing," Thomas said. "And your ex built the business and this whole event with your stolen credit." I asked him what my options were. Civil suit, identity theft charge. You could file for damages, possibly restitution. But if I were you, he looked up. I'd gather everything, present it to someone who cares about reputation more than justice, like, say, the bride's father. That stopped me cold, because Hannah's family had money, real money, the kind that cares deeply about appearances. And suddenly, the idea of revenge didn't feel angry anymore. It felt surgical. I wasn't just going to confront Gerald. I was going to hand the truth to someone who had the power to burn the fantasy they'd built together from the inside. Before I left, Thomas looked at me carefully. Most people who get conned like this, they don't fight back. They're too ashamed. You're different. I stood up, gathered the folder, zipped my coat. No, I'm just finished pretending I wasn't in the room. I hadn't spoken to Carl Brenner in nearly 15 years. He was one of Gerald's old drinking buddies. They used to coach Little League together, back when Gerald still showed up to things. Carl was quiet, decent, always struck me as the kind of man who believed in loyalty until it turned poisonous. I found him on Facebook, sent a message with just one line. "Do you still have the envelope Gerald gave you in 2005? He replied in less than 5 minutes. I wondered how long it would take. Yes, still sealed, still in my gun safe. We met at a diner just off the highway, one of those places that smells like coffee and cooked onions no matter the time of day. He wore a windbreaker. His hands trembled slightly as he handed me the file. Inside was the original DNA test, dated, signed, with Gerald's name as the requesting party. He made me keep it, Carl said, stirring his coffee like it owed him money. Said if anything ever went sideways, he wanted someone to verify the truth. I looked up. "And you never asked why he didn't tell Ethan?" He snorted. "Because Gerald didn't want the truth. He wanted leverage. He told me point blank, if Wynn ever tries to make me look bad, I'll drop this on her and walk away clean." My stomach clenched, but not with shock. I'd always suspected Gerald kept that test like a knife behind his back, but hearing it said out loud that he planned to use it against me felt like watching a man spit on every year I spent keeping Ethan's world safe. Carl leaned forward. "You want me to talk? To testify? I will. You say the word." I looked at him, this man who'd once played second base next to Gerald at every company softball game, and I realized something. Gerald didn't just lose me. He'd been losing everyone for years, quietly, slowly, until no one would vouch for him anymore. I nodded. "You'll get a call when it's time." Carl's hands shook a little as he passed me his signed affidavit. "Burn it down, Wynn. I'll bring the matches." I cleared off the dining room table. Ruthie sat nearby, drinking lukewarm tea like it was whiskey. She didn't ask what I was doing. She just watched, quietly, like a woman attending a private war. I laid everything out in rows. The DNA report, now stapled to Carl's affidavit. The forged loan documents, all with dates, file numbers, and my faked signature next to Gerald's real one. The bank statement showing transfers into Gerald's LLC. Receipts for the wedding venue, dress boutique, catering company, all tied to accounts in my name. And finally, Aunt Margaret's letter, the one that had cracked everything open. I bought a fresh binder. Red, clean, deliberate. Labeled it, wedding fraud, Knox Wynn. Confidential evidence, Ruthie exhaled when she read the label. Not a laugh, something closer to a shiver. "You gonna give that to Ethan?" she asked gently. "No," I said. "Not yet." Because Ethan wasn't ready to hear the truth. But someone else would be ready to act on it. Mr. Whitaker, Hannah's father. A man who owned 3 car dealerships and a chain of orthopedic clinics. The kind of man who had a public image to protect. A man who wore old money like cologne, Not loud, but always in the room. I called his office and told the receptionist I had urgent documents related to the financial foundation of his daughter's upcoming marriage. His assistant called me back in 30 minutes. He'd like to meet, privately. I smiled, not smug, not angry, just clear. Because this was never about revenge. It was about record keeping. It was about making sure that when people told the story, when they remembered the wedding where everything fell apart, they'd finally say my name, not just Gerald's, not just Ethan's, mine. The wedding was held at Linden Estate, an upstate venue that screamed old money pretending to be humble. Columns, strings of imported lights, violinists warming up in the side garden. The valet tried to wave me off at the gate. Event is private, ma'am. He didn't even look at the invitation list. Just saw my age, my car, my dress. Navy blue, clean-lined, nothing flashy. The color of a woman who's come to be heard, not photographed. I didn't argue. I opened my purse, pulled out the card Mr. Whitaker's assistant had given me, and held it up. A moment later, a man in a charcoal suit stepped out from the main entrance, scanned the crowd, and walked directly toward me. "She's the groom's mother," he said to security, his voice firm. "Let her through." Hannah's father. He didn't smile, but he didn't flinch either. Inside, everything looked like a magazine spread. Cream florals, crystal glassware, personalized menus, white chairs in perfect rows. The kind of wedding built to be remembered for beauty, not truth. I saw Gerald before he saw me. Tan. Polished. That same smug tilt of the head I remembered from court mediation. He was talking to the officiant, hands in his pockets like he'd already won. Then he looked up. And he saw me. His expression didn't crack, but his posture did. Subtle shift. Chin pulled in, right hand flexing near his jacket hem. He was calculating, not if I had something. He knew I did. He was calculating what I'd do with it. Ethan was nowhere in sight, probably getting ready in the groom's suite, rehearsing vows, trusting that his father had the day under control. Mr. Whitaker led me to a private room behind the main hall. I handed him the folder without a word. He opened it, page by page. His lips tightened at the DNA report, paused longer at the forged loan documents. When he reached the wedding expenses paid under my stolen identity, he closed the binder and looked at me squarely. "Do you want to ruin the wedding?" he asked. "No," I said. "I want the lies to ruin themselves," he nodded once. "Then when the moment comes, you'll stand up, and I'll back you." We returned to the ceremony space together. Guests were seated. The violins started again. And as I walked past the front row, past Gerald, past Clarissa, past the white roses meant to frame someone else's fairy tale, I didn't look down. Because I hadn't come to watch. I'd come to finish something. They were halfway through the vows when I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I just stepped forward into that perfect white aisle lined with petals and polished shoes and said the first words loud enough for the microphone to catch. Before these vows are spoken, the bride and groom should know what's being promised and what's being hidden. Gasps, some polite, some sharp. The officiant froze mid-sentence. Hannah turned. Ethan turned slower. Gerald? He didn't turn at all. He sank. I opened my purse and pulled out a folded envelope, cream-colored, worn at the edges, Aunt Margaret's handwriting still visible. I unfolded the letter. My voice didn't shake. This was written by my aunt, a woman who kept records Gerald hoped would never be found. The violinist stopped playing. Someone in the back coughed. I kept reading. "You deserve to know who lied to you, and why. Your father," Gerald Knox, performed a DNA test on Ethan without consent. He discovered he was not the biological father. He chose to stay silent, not out of love, but control. He used that truth as leverage against Wynne. And when he left, he didn't just abandon his family. He stole from it. I looked up. Ethan's face was unreadable, pale, still. I walked forward, slowly, held out the DNA report, now clipped to Carl's affidavit. For a moment, No one moved. No gasps now. No music. Just the quiet panic of people realizing they've been seated in the middle of a collapsing house. Ethan held the DNA report like it might bite. "Is this real?" he asked. Gerald didn't answer right away. His mouth opened, then shut. He looked around, searching for someone, anyone, who might still be on his side. Clarissa was frozen, lips pressed tight. Hannah was already backing up a step, eyes darting toward her father. "I did it for you," Gerald finally said. "You wouldn't have understood. You were just a boy. I stayed because I loved you." That word "loved" landed like a slap. Ethan looked at me, then back at Gerald. "You stayed so you could control her, so you could wait for the right moment to ruin her." Gerald's voice cracked. He was slipping now. Not angry, just exposed. "She lied to me. You think I wasn't hurt? You think I didn't deserve?" "She raised me." Ethan cut in, louder. "You left." Silence. No one moved. Not even the photographers, who had slowly lowered their cameras. And then Ethan did something I will never forget. He turned to the officiant, who was still standing awkwardly with his binder mid-page. "We're going to take a break." And then he turned back to Gerald. "You need to leave." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. Gerald looked at him, stunned, like someone had pulled the floor out from under his name. "Ethan, I'm your father." "No," Ethan said quietly. "You were a man who lived in the same house. That's not the same thing." Gerald looked at Hannah, but she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her father. That's when Mr. Whitaker stood, calm, controlled, powerful in the way only old money knows how to be. "I think it's time we all see what else this family's built on," he gestured to me. "Ms. Wynne, would you please show them the rest?" And just like that, the wedding stopped being about vows and started being about truth. I took a step forward and placed the red folder on a table meant for the unity candles. The embossed label still gleamed under the lights. "Wedding fraud, Knox Wynne, confidential evidence." I looked at Gerald. That letter wasn't the whole story, not even close. The silence in the room turned electric. No music, no movement, just 100 eyes snapping to attention. I opened the folder. This is a list of business loans taken out in my name, forged, with documents signed not by me, but by Gerald. I pulled out the forms, held them high enough for the front row to see. This is a credit line opened using my social security number, used to fund his company when it was about to collapse. Gasps now, audible. A woman near the aisle muttered, "Oh my God." Someone's phone chimed and was quickly silenced. These are receipts from the wedding venue, the catering, the dress boutique, all paid for with money stolen through accounts opened under my identity. And then I said the line I'd waited months to say. This wedding wasn't built on love. It was built on theft. Gerald tried to cut in. Voice tight, controlled but thinning. "You don't know what you're talking about. She's just angry. You don't understand the full—" "I understand fraud," Mr. Whitaker said, without raising his voice. "And I understand how hard it is to explain this to your investors." Gerald froze. Because that word investors wasn't personal. It was legal, financial, dangerous. Mr. Whitaker turned to Hannah. "Unless you want your marriage to begin with shared liability, I suggest we end this now." Hannah didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at Gerald the way someone looks at an empty bank account, with recognition and quiet regret. Then she took off her engagement ring, laid it on the table next to the folder, and walked away. She didn't look back, not at the flowers, not at the violinist still frozen mid-bow, not at Ethan, and certainly not at Gerald. The sound of her heels echoing down the aisle was the only music left. The DJ, sensing the shift, unplugged his deck, quietly, without waiting for instruction. Guests started whispering, then standing, then gathering their things, not with panic, but with that slow, stunned discomfort people feel when a funeral happens during what was supposed to be brunch. Clarissa stood up, wobbled slightly, and grabbed Gerald's arm. "Do something," she hissed. But he didn't move. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. His suit suddenly looked too tight, too new, like a costume borrowed for a part he didn't know how to play anymore. Ethan stepped forward. He wasn't looking at me. Not yet. His eyes were locked on Gerald. He took the mic, not for drama, just for clarity. "This is done," he said. "The ceremony, the business, the lies." He held up the copy of the forged documents. "Let the guests see. My mother didn't ruin this day. She saved me from signing my name onto someone else's debt." He turned to Gerald, holding nothing back now. "You used her credit, you used her silence, and you used me so you could look like a father." Gerald took a step forward, maybe to grab the mic, maybe to plead. Ethan stepped back. "You lost the right to speak the day you forged her name." That line landed like glass cracking under a heel. Clarissa grabbed her purse, whispered something sharp under her breath, walked out. The florist wheeled out a cart of centerpieces. The planner made a single call, probably to cancel the cake, or the drone photographer, or both. And Gerald? He stood alone. No bride, no son, no performance left. Just a man who had spent years building a life on lies and watched it collapse in front of people who now knew every word had been bought with someone else's suffering. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just picked up the red folder, closed it carefully. Because justice doesn't always need applause. Sometimes it just needs a witness. I carried the folder out under one arm. No one tried to stop me. Ruthie was waiting by my car. She didn't ask what happened. She'd seen enough through the open doors. She just held out a thermos of hot tea like a medal. We sat for a while. Two older women, silent, watching men pack up folding chairs that were never used. "You did it," she finally said. I shook my head. "No, he did it. I just brought receipts." The first lawsuit came 6 days later. Mr. Whitaker's legal team filed a civil complaint. Fraud, intentional misrepresentation, unauthorized use of funds. The second wave hit Gerald's business accounts. Credit lines frozen. Vendors pulling out. A former partner flipped and admitted Gerald used forged co-signatures, mine, to secure expansion loans. I didn't have to file criminal charges. The banks did it for me. Ethan moved out of the apartment he shared with Hannah 2 weeks after the wedding. He didn't come to me right away. Didn't call. Didn't apologize. But one afternoon, I found a box on my porch. Inside, the childhood fire truck drawing I thought was lost. A photo of me and Ethan at his 5th grade spelling bee. And a sticky note with 3 words written in shaky pen. "I know now." That was enough. For now. Hannah never returned his calls. She didn't need to. She left the ring. She walked out clean. And she didn't look back. Last I heard, Gerald was staying in a long-term rental near Albany. Alone. No business. No contact with Ethan. His name was removed from the company site. The new partners issued a press release that read like a digital obituary. Former executive no longer affiliated with operations. No one asked for his side. Because by then, everyone had already seen the truth printed in black ink. And me? I got my name back. The bank dropped the liens. The forged debts were dissolved. I signed one last affidavit with Thomas Reed standing beside me, and for the first time in over a decade, my credit report was mine again. Clean, whole, untangled. Ruthie brought over lemon bars the next morning. We ate them on the back porch. "To peace," she said, raising her mug. I raised mine back. Then, for the first time in years, I went to bed without checking the locks twice. Thank you for listening to my story. Have you ever sacrificed everything for someone only to be pushed aside when it finally mattered most? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.